This is the first of two brief videos about the relational model. You should have also listened to some videos from Professor Whittam about the relational model. So the relational model is another model of data, something that expresses the structure of your data. And it is an old model, 50 years old, and it's the most famous model, which ruled the market for database management systems really up until today, but exclusively for 30 years at least. Now we have some newer models due to the amount of data that some systems are processing, and we'll talk about those at a little later time. So the relational model is a way to express the structure of your data, and it's quite simple. The data is expressed as a set of relations. And what's a relation? Well, it's simply a table like you would recognize from a spreadsheet. This table is something that has attributes or columns, and it has the data in the table, which are called tuples or rows or records more casually. So the formal words for this are relation with tuples and attributes, but the casual words for it are tables, and in those tables we have columns or fields and rows or records. But basically these rows are the data. So attributes mean pretty much the same thing as they did in the ER model. They mean the description of the data that's in the tables. So attributes have a domain, and that's the type of legal values for that attribute. And that might be a data type like int or boolean or string, or it could be an explicit set of values. Now, attributes in the relational model are atomic. It means that every attribute has only a single value, a value that can't be divided. So there's no such thing as a composite attribute in the relational model, and there's absolutely no such thing as a multi-valued attribute. So if we have an attribute like color, then only one value is allowed in there at a time, red. So a database schema is an expression of the structure of the data. So in this case, we're talking about a relational schema. So the relational schema tells us what relations or tables make up our database, and for each of those tables, what are their attributes. So it's just a list of relations and their attributes. And a schema, or the structure of the data, is often also called metadata, which means the data that describes the data. And here's an example of a simple schema for a relational database. We have two relations, doctor, patient, and here's their attributes. Now, a database instance or state is the set of data that's inside it. Now, this data that's in a database is changing all the time. So a database instance is a snapshot in time of the data that's in the database, which means it's the set of all the rows in all the tables in the database. It's all the data in all of the tables. all the values of every attribute for every row in every table. Now, the values of an attribute can either be one of two things. They can either be a legal value from the domain, so if it's an int, it's going to be an int, or it can be null. Null is what's there to indicate that that attribute is empty. And the reason something could be empty or null is a lot of different reasons. It can mean that we don't know the value of that attribute. It might mean that that attribute is not available yet, so it's not yet in the database. It can also mean that it's not defined for that particular row. So for some rows, maybe one of the attributes just doesn't apply. Maybe a person doesn't have a home phone number or doesn't have any children. There could be some attributes that don't apply. And then a thing to always keep in mind is relations and the tuples inside them are not, they don't have a defined order. So a relation is an unordered set of tuples. If you need an order, you have to supply it yourself. It's not part of the model. Okay, next video we'll talk about constraints.